So validation is about ensuring that the requirements support the business needs. Have we got the right set of requirements? So it's like the difference between getting things right and doing the things right and doing the right thing. So this is about doing the right thing. Validation is doing the right thing, whereas verification is doing things right. So you've got perfect, everything is good, accurate, everything is correct, complete, everything is fantastic with the requirements, the captured, communicated, well specified, all that, that's fine. But are we working on the right set of requirements? Have you prioritized the requirements? Have you got the right requirements to be worked on for the next sprint or the next iteration? That's what is important. And how can you say that you've got the right ones or wrong ones is based on the factor that it should deliver the business value. It may be fantastic technological marvel, and it has got all things that makes it a fantastic looking, great looking website and all that stuff. But is it of any value or not in the first place? What is it value that the end users are getting out of this? What are the customers getting out of this? If they're not getting any value, then sorry, I'm afraid it might be a fantastic looking product or a great technological marvel. Still it doesn't deliver because there's no business value. So that's how we need to validate the requirements. So it is as we discussed, verification, validation are all continuous processes. It's not happening in just one place and one time. They are the continuous process, and that's why even in agile context we say continuous um, continuous development, continuous integration, and continuous delivery. So that's the mantra for agile success. So you need to continuously do this, kind of engage in these activities so that you are delivering business value. And when you say business value, it's all about the stakeholders' perspective of how they would achieve that. What is their vision? Are we able to meet the vision of our stakeholders? What is the proposed solution to be the to be situation? Are we able to meet it the way we initially thought about? And the inputs for these are the requirements, so which are specified, they're modeled, and also perhaps even the verified requirements as well. All of that are going to be the input for this. By this time, we've got the verified requirements as well. So what does validate requirements really entail? It means that we need to have the business objectives in place and align these requirements with the business objectives, the vision, the mission, the goals, the strategy, and everything that would be. So there should be a complete alignment with what we have got now as a product requirement to what the business has got as its vision, as its strategic objective. So we need to be very conscious of that. And then we also need to look at the future state description in terms of what is a to-be solution, what is the overall, the scope that we have set out for initially. The potential value, what is the value that we're going to deliver to the business, to the customers, to the users, to the stakeholders. Very important again as a kind of a yardstick for us to measure and assess whether requirements are fulfilling those values that we have initially identified. Solution scope, again, very important. Whether is it whatever we're trying to do, is it in the right direction? Is it in the box or not? Or are we doing something that is completely out of the box, out of the context? Then we might have to kind of ignore that and again look at and focus our energies to deliver what is within the horizons, what is within the scope of our proposed solution. And the output for this is obviously the validated requirements. By this time, by the end of this activity, we would have the validated requirements as the output, which would then again go into as inputs into the defining of the design options. So once the requirements are verified, validated, traced, prioritized, and blah, 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 that means that they're in a good shape. Now we're going to the design and the architecture of that. So measure the solution performance, make sure that we are going in the right direction, assess what are the parameters that we need to consider. So this is essentially what a validation requirements input-output diagram delivers. So what do we need to do as BAs in this context, in this kind of activity? We would need to make sure that we have clearly specified the assumptions. We need to identify, not only identify, but also specify, not just specify, but also validate our assumptions at this stage. we cannot leave assumptions, hanging loose there. So we must make sure that we have got clear understanding of what assumptions that we have laid upon. Are those assumptions valid now? So we need to validate those assumptions, and that's very important. And then sometimes it could be unprecedented, some things which we have not done before, some things totally new for us. Still, we need to, cater to those requirements and cater to those as something that must be, addressed. And then we should also try and come up with some kind of measurable criteria. What are the ways that we can try and assess these requirements? How can we make sure that we have got the requirements in the right place out of these, the product backlog of thousands of items in the backlog, requirements, changes, defects, and new ideas? How can we try and shortlist some of those? On what basis? What are the prioritization parameters? We need to have some kind of idea at this point of time. And then we need to obviously get an alignment with the solution scope. So that's what is important. So this again need to be looked at in the context of where do we want to go from here. We can't just create hundreds and thousands of requirements without checking which direction we're going. We need to have a clear idea where we want to go. What are we trying to develop? If we're trying to develop a customer relationship management product, a system, then all your requirements that you've been capturing need to address that. It cannot be anything different from what we have set out our scope as, our vision as. It needs to fulfill that vision. Each of these requirements that you have been gathering, that you've been trying to specify here, needs to map and point you to that direction. That needs to be the north. That particular solution scope is your indicator, is the way that you should try and go. And that is the direction which you must follow. Everything else is like, can be ignored safely because they're not fitting in the context of what we want to set out for. And who are the stakeholders here in this context of the validation of requirements? You have got, first, I would say that you need to first look at all the potential stakeholders. More so, you need to work with, for example, we talked about testers and all those. Still, they're valid. They're very much important. But you also need to work with the customers, your end users, sponsors, all of these, again, like project manager, who actually give you the kind of the perspective with respect to the communication with other stakeholders, and having a sense of the project perspective, the milestones, the resources. So again, very important for us to have a blend of different stakeholders and how we can engage them. So again, the domain SME, I don't want to really go on and on, repeat the same thing, but very important, like how we've been talking about before as well, the problem perspective, or the needs, opportunities, and from the industry point of view, the business rules, all of those would be provided by the domain SME. The end users give the perspective of the usage context, very rich, because no matter how much the rest of the stakeholders say, the end users provide you the contextual rich data in terms of how the product would get used in the place, at the time, the way it is designed for. So that's very, very, very important. And the implementation SME would obviously, as we discussed before as well, give you the perspective about the solution in terms of how the solution could be implemented, what could be the ways, the approaches, the techniques, the tools we can use, and what are the implications about that. Project manager, and obviously gives you a sense of authority, sense of managerial aspect about it. The sponsors would give you the aspect of how the budgets need to be managed. Are we going out of the budget? What is the vision? Are we aligned with the overall organizational vision? And obviously testers, very handy to again validate whether this particular requirement is in line with the original scope and in line with the overall vision and mission of the project and the business. So very important set of stakeholders at every stage that we have. So what kind of techniques would you use here? You need to use acceptance criteria. You need to use, again, very, very relevant and handy here to have those acceptance criteria defined, and also not just defined, but also by this time you would have enough of the, perhaps you need to kind of start validation of those criteria against the requirements. Are we in the right frame of mind? Are we in the right direction? Are we using it in the right way? So that's pretty much the kind of outlook that you would have. Document analysis, by now you would have some of the documents handy. You would start off with, for example, the requirements are already in place. You start with the high level architecture, the high level design document perhaps, and some of those other product attributes and product related documents also, like user manual, setup guides, and perhaps even the existing versions of some of those documents you need to go through to be able to align your requirements with those of the solution scope. Financial analysis would actually give you the perspective in terms of the cost benefit analysis, and again in terms of aligning your business case with the overall vision of the product. So that's a very important technique that you can try and use here. Item tracking, like we were discussing before, very important in terms of managing the backlog and then making sure we've got the requirements in a way that they're traceable, they're actually kind of prioritized, they can be monitored and make sure that it is built into the product implementation. Metrics and key performance indicators are again another technique that we can really use to assess where we are going. Are we in the right direction? Are we traveling at the right speed? Have we reached a stage where we can say we are progressing in the right direction as aligned with the overall business vision and the product scope and the solution scope? And then obviously the reviews of the senior management, the peer reviews, and the third-party reviews, reviews by regulators, auditors. All of these would really help us put the whole perspective of the requirements validated. And then risk and analysis and management gives you a good kind of handle to assess how the risks that you have originally identified before, how are they being addressed? Are they being monitored properly? Have you got the risk mitigation in place? And this is basically kind of a checkpoint for you to assess whether the risks that have been originally identified, have they materialized? If they occurred, if the events have got any impact on your product scope or the solution scope, and then how are you reacting? Have you got enough resources, enough kind of budgets, people, technologies, tools, and infrastructure and operations in place to be able to face those risks and implement the mitigation strategies for those risks? So very important to actually take stock of that at this point of time. Again, based on this, you can try and validate your requirements, whether you've got the right set of requirements, whether you've got it in the way it should be, and have you prioritized the right set of requirements which actually are aligned to the risks that you identified. So it's if it is something that is risky, if there's a business risk, there's a market risk, then you wouldn't obviously want to continue, because there is that potential impact that it could cause that could have a direct impact on the way you're implementing this